It's becoming increasingly clear that our cities are facing some pretty serious environmental pressures.
Hmm.
We're seeing, the effects of pollution, feeling that extra heat in urban areas, and, well, those green spaces seem to be shrinking.
They really are. These are definitely growing concerns in cities pretty much everywhere.
And that's exactly what we're digging into
Yeah.
today. This idea of corredores verdes, or green corridors. We've pulled together some really interesting sources for you.
Yeah, we've got a few different angles.
We do. We'll look at a legislative proposal from Colombia aiming for this in rural areas, then the, frankly, quite inspiring story of Medellin using them in the city to fight heat.
Right, and then we have a more general text that sort of defines them and talks about the bigger picture.
Exactly. So the idea is to give you, our listener, a really solid understanding of this potential solution, maybe spark some aha moments, but keep it manageable.
So essentially, a green corridor, at its heart, is a network, a connected system of, well, vegetated spaces.
Like green threads running through the landscape.
Kind of. Think of it linking up maybe bigger natural areas, parks, sometimes even small fragmented habitats. The key is that connection, that continuity.
Got it. So our mission here is to really explore this. We want to unpack that Colombian proposal, see how it actually played out in Medellin, and then step back and think about, what this all means for sustainable cities.
Okay, so let's start with that Colombian legislative proposal. It's called Corredores de Biodiversidad en Linderos Rurales. Biodiversity Corridors in Rural Borders. Project Law number 041 of 2023.
Right. Let's unpack this one. It comes from Representative Hanan Dario Cadavid, representing Antioquia from the Centro Democrático Party. And this isn't just a small pilot project, is it?
No, not at all. The proposal is for implementation across Colombia, and it targets both public and private properties, specifically those over 100 hectares.
Wow. Okay. That's a significant chunk of land. What are the stated goals?
Well, they're pretty broad. Things like sustainable development, protecting fresh water, boosting ecosystem services. Those benefits nature provides us reforestation and even improving air quality. It's quite comprehensive.
So practically speaking, what does it mean for a landowner if this passes?
It sounds like they'd have about 2 years to create what are called live fences,
Mm-hmm.
basically planting hedges or rows of trees along their property lines.
Using specific types of plants?
Yes, the proposal mentions using native trees and species, and specifically ones that help with reforestation efforts. So it's quite targeted.
What's interesting is where the idea came from. They seem to be looking at two different things.
Right. On one hand, they cite Jasper National Park in Canada, for how corridors help wildlife move around.
Okay, so animal movement.
Yeah. But they also draw inspiration from urban green corridors, recognizing how those help with biodiversity in cities, reducing pollution, tackling that heat island effect we talked about.
So kind of blending rural wildlife needs with urban environmental solutions.
Exactly. It's an interesting mix. And the implementation plan involves, well, a lot of players.
Like who?
You've got the local territorial entities, the autonomous regional corporations. Those are the regional environmental bodies and other environmental authorities overseeing it.
Okay.
Then the national government sets the rules with guidance from the Ministry of Environment or MADSS.
And it's not just government, right? I saw mention of police, militaries, social groups.
Yeah, private sector, educational institutions too. On paper, it looks like a very collaborative approach.
So MADS pulls together the planting info.
That's the idea. And crucially, the proposal says environmental authorities and local entities need to budget for technical support for the landowners.
Ah, so they recognize people will need help actually doing this. That's important.
It is. And you can see why they're pushing for this. The proposal mentions some stark figures: 123,517 hectares deforested in Colombia.
Wow.
Yeah, and they give Antioquia as an example, over 500 hectares gone in just 2 months. It paints a picture of, well, urgency.
Definitely highlights the problem. And what about other perspectives? I saw a mention of a representative from the Amazon region.
Yes, Representative Monica Carina Bocanegra. She supports environmental projects, understandably, given her region's incredible biodiversity. The Amazon's something like 390 billion trees, 10% of world biodiversity according to WWF.
Those numbers are just mind-boggling.
They really are. But she also made a key point: the need for more resources for specific studies in the Amazon.
Right, because what works in one place might need adapting for somewhere like the Amazon.
Precisely. It underlines that a national law needs regional flexibility.
Good point. The proposal also talks about public participation, right? campaigns and getting people involved voluntarily.
Fostering environmental awareness, which is often key, isn't it? Getting that buy-in from the ground up.
Absolutely. So where does this bill stand now?
Well, according to our sources, it's pending its first debate in the Fifth Constitutional Commission of the House. So still early days in the legislative process.
Okay. So that's the big picture, top-down legislative approach being considered. Now let's shift gears. Let's look at a place that's actually done this kind of thing. Medellin, Colombia. That BBC article paints a really vivid picture.
It really does. Medellin's experience is fascinating. They started their urban green corridor project back in 2016.
And the drivers were heat and bad air quality.
Exactly. Both major issues for them. And the article includes that anecdote from Moises Castro, the fruit vendor.
Yeah, I remember that. He talked about trees being removed years ago and then the positive difference when they started replanting cooler, cleaner air. It's powerful hearing it from someone who's lived it.
It really brings it home. And it touches on that heat island effect, cities being hotter than surrounding areas. Medellin's corridors, they've built over 30 of them now.
Connecting roads, streams, parks, even vertical gardens.
Yeah, linking everything up. And according to the local government data mentioned, they've managed to reduce the city's average temperature by about 2 degrees Celsius.
2 degrees. That sounds maybe small, but in a city that must feel significant.
Oh, absolutely. It makes a real difference to comfort, energy use for cooling, public health. It shows how green infrastructure directly impacts urban life.
And the scale was pretty ambitious from the start, wasn't it? Loads of plants and trees.
Yeah, 120,000 plants, 12,500 trees initially, with plans for millions more smaller plants and hundreds of thousands more trees later on.
What about the cost? Seemed fairly reasonable, considering.
The initial investment was reported as US $16.3 million, with annual maintenance around $625,000 in 2022. For the kind of impact they're seeing, many see it as a pretty cost-effective approach.
No wonder it's getting attention globally, a model for climate resilience, maybe.
Potentially, yeah. And it's important to remember why Medellin needed this so badly. It wasn't just the heat.
Right, the air pollution, too. Their location in that valley traps pollutants.
Exactly. The Aburrá Valley acts like a bowl, and a lot of that pollution comes from private transport.
How bad is the air quality data?
Well, the article states their PM 2.5 levels, those tiny harmful particles, are about triple the WHO limits. Higher than Bogota or São Paulo, though not as extreme as, say, New Delhi.
Still concerning, though, especially during the dry season.
Right, that's when it can spike up to around 55 micrograms per cubic meter, which is definitely worrying.
And the health impacts are real. That study linking pollution to premature deaths, nearly 2,000 in 2016. That's shocking.
It is, and the projection that it could rise significantly by 2030 without action really underscores the need for solutions like these corridors.
So how do the trees help with the pollution itself, like green barriers?
That's the idea. Trees absorb pollutants. The article mentions a 2021 study in Medellin found the mango tree was particularly good at soaking up PM 2.5. Resilient, too.
Interesting. So are they sure the corridors caused the air quality improvement?
Well, the article suggests the direct link is still being studied in detail, but the initial signs and the general principle are positive. Plus, connecting 124 parks, that's a lot of green space working together.
And they estimated CO2 removal, too.
Yeah, just 2 parks, Nudabar and Volador, were estimated to remove about 40 tons of CO2 a year. It all adds up.
What about local people? Did they get behind it?
Seems like it. That vendor, Leon de Rio, mentioned strong community support. And they use participatory budgeting, basically letting residents decide where some money goes, and people chose green projects.
That's great. It gives people ownership, doesn't it?
Definitely. And the local government kept planting thousands of trees. Plus, that program hiring people displaced by violence as gardeners. That's a brilliant social dimension.
Yeah, environmental benefits and dignity through work. That's impressive.
And the results seem to speak for themselves. The former Environment Secretary, Sergio Orozco, talked about temperature drops even greater than 2 degrees in some spots over 3 degrees.
Wow. And wildlife returning.
Birds, lizards, frogs, bats, species apparently not seen for years, started coming back. Locals even think it helps control pests naturally.
So measurable temperature drops, documented wildlife return. It sounds like a real ecological recovery.
It does. And they got recognition for it, that Ashton Award in 2019 for nature-based cooling.
It's clearly inspiring others, too. Bogota, Barranquilla, São Paulo looking at similar ideas.
Yeah, the model seems to be spreading. Even that ambitious idea turning the central airport into a park, though it's apparently blocked for, now shows the level of green thinking.
It really does. So Medellin's experience gives us this fantastic concrete example. How does this connect back to the broader ideas in that text document we have, the Redes de Corredores Verdes?
Well, it aligns really well. That document basically formalizes a lot of what we saw in Medellin. It reiterates the core definition, these interconnected green networks.
And the objectives match up, right? Connecting biodiversity, improving environmental quality, recreation, health, climate change mitigation, and adaptation.
Exactly. And the document breaks down the components you might find in these networks.
Right.
Things like linear features, urban gardens, planting along riverbanks, greening roadsides, but also, crucially, ecological connectivity, wildlife crossings, links between habitats.
And community involvement is key there, too.
Absolutely. Participatory management is listed as a key component, plus complementary stuff like green roofs, green walls, sustainable drainage. It's all part of the bigger picture.
That document lists a ton of benefits: ecological, climatic.
Social, health-related, urbanistic, even economic benefits.
Yeah, things like better water filtration, less heat stress, nicer places to be active, maybe higher property values near green spaces.
Reduce water treatment costs, potential for ecotourism, maybe even lower healthcare costs from cleaner air and more activity. It really covers a lot of ground.
But it's not all easy, is it? The document mentions challenges, too.
Oh, for sure. It's realistic about the difficulties. High upfront costs are a big one. Land isn't cheap. Planting takes resources.
And keeping them going, maintenance must be ongoing.
Definitely. Long-term maintenance and management are crucial, and sometimes there can be conflicts over how land is used.
What about fragmentation, if the corridor isn't properly connected?
That's another challenge, making sure they're truly continuous. Plus, choosing the right species native versus potentially invasive ones, making sure they suit the local microclimate.
And getting people on board, does everyone love the idea of more wildlife nearby?
Not always. Social acceptance can be an issue. Sometimes people worry about unwanted animals, so education is important. And of course, extreme weather can damage the green infrastructure itself.
So it's complex. The document gives examples from other places too, right? Not just Medellin.
Yeah, quite a diverse range. There's the Corridor Verde Transpire between Spain and France, focusing on big birds of prey in the Pyrenees.
Okay, very specific focus there.
Then Seoul's Green Line, an old railway, turned into a pedestrian path with native plants. Very urban regeneration.
Cool.
Melbourne's blue-green corridors, integrating water management, like for floods, with green spaces.
Ah, linking water and green. Makes sense.
And Cape Town has urban wildlife corridors for smaller animals, reptiles, mixing conservation with recreation.
So lots of different ways to apply the basic idea depending on the context.
Exactly. And the text highlights keys to making them work. Good planning, using tools like GIS involving the community right from the design stage.
Monitoring to see if they're actually working?
Yep, continuous monitoring, maybe camera traps, wildlife counts, sensors, plus being adaptable, able to scale up, and finding diverse funding sources.
Okay, so pulling all this together, we've got this big idea of green corridors. We see it in a potential national law in Colombia focused on rural biodiversity. And then we see it powerfully demonstrated in Medellin, tackling very urban problems like heat and pollution. And the broader text confirms these principles and shows us examples worldwide.
It paints a picture of an integrated approach, doesn't it? Finding ways for, well, nature and human settlements to coexist better, enhancing resilience, improving well-being.
Even with the challenges involved.
Even with the challenges. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a really promising strategy. Yeah, the Colombian proposal, Medellin's story, they offer concrete examples. Maybe they spark some thoughts about your own community.
Right. So, wrapping this up, the key takeaway seems to be that green corridors are much more than just planting a few trees. They're strategic.
Definitely. There are networks designed for multiple benefits: ecological, social, economic, climatic. We saw the ambition of the Colombian proposal and the tangible results in Medellin.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Go on.
Think about the green spaces where you live. Big parks, small patches, riverbanks, maybe even just verge strips. How could those principles of connectivity, of ecological thinking be applied there?
Even on a small scale.
Yeah. How could we enhance biodiversity, maybe cool things down a bit, make things more livable right in our own neighborhoods? What role could individuals or local groups play in fostering these little corridors of life?
That's a great question to ponder.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this.